Hello and welcome to today's video where I am going to compare the presence of champions during MSI to what the patch was 14.6 prior to MSI. On 14.6 we had 124 major region games in playoffs to look at, as well as 78 games at MSI to compare them to. On the board here I have the champions that were affected by those patches, whether it was buffs or nerfs. That's better indicated over here. I'll accept Zach, and we'll get into why I believe Zach is, an anomaly. And then over here, I have the 10 most played champions or highest presence champions on 14.6 and then 14.8. And we can see that there are a couple differences in the meta. Personally, I feel like a lot of people try and compare League of Legends to traditional sports in the way that, this team's doing good now, so they're probably going to do well at Worlds or do well in the upcoming split and things of that nature. But League of Legends is not like traditional sports. The rules change every patch. Now, we can pretend that, these are placebo, this, that, and the third, and it doesn't actually matter. But in presence and in game, we see every patch does affect the meta in some way. The rules do change in some way. So that's why I often say the team that wins international tournaments might not necessarily be the best team in the world, but the team that is best on that patch. I said it in 2022 when DRX upset T1. Personally, I felt like T1 were the best team of that entire year. And then in 2023, personally, I thought JDG were the best team. Regardless of T1 winning Worlds or not, the patch fit T1 best, and they were able to win in that rule set. So when we look at MSI, 3 top lane champions had heavily affected presence, at least double digits. So Camille was buffed. It went from 6% presence on 14.6 to 31% presence. So an increase of 1 out of every 4 games. I mean, hell, we're looking at 1 out of every 20 to nearly 3 out of every 10. Actually, that's a big difference. Shoot, I don't even know what I was saying, 1 in 3 or whatever the hell that was. It's literally 1 in 20 to 3 out of 10, which is significantly different, right? That's 6 times more games of Camille. They attempted to get it out of support and move to top lane, and for the most part, that's what occurred. In 14.6, it was 100% support, and then at MSI, it was majority top lane. We saw Bin and Keen do very well, so Camille definitely changed things. We saw it as an important ban in the finals, so I would say the patch in and of itself, just by that alone, changed the rules at least a bit. We saw Rek'Sai significantly nerfed going into the tournament. 4 out of every 5 games, Rek'Sai showed up in draft, whether it was in-game or in the ban phase. And then at the tournament, it was 1 out of every 5. So literally went from 4 out of every 5 to 1 out of every 5. That's a massive nerf. Rek'Sai was pretty much eliminated outside of G2. For the most part, we saw a couple teams played here or there, but really it was no longer a difference maker. And going into it, I had said on the 14.7, 14.8 video the patches may affect which teams the most, and I thought that Rek'Sai would be one of those champions that would cause trouble for specifically G2, but G2 were able to adapt and find a way. The other top laner is Zach. So Zach technically fell under nerf on the patch notes. But due to, personally, I feel like, so it was an LEC pick, right? For the most part, going into the tournament. Some players played it here or there, but frankly, all I think of when I thought of Zach was Oscar and BB and the LEC. So at this event, they played a lot of Zach, those teams did, and other teams started adopting Zach. Hell, Faker even played it in mid. So Zach actually went from only 13% presence on 14.6, so just over 1 out of every 10 games, to 39%, so almost 2 out of every 5 games, so literally 1 out of every 10 to 2 out of every 5. I mean, that's a significant difference. Zach really became quite a popular pick despite them nerfing him going into the tournament. And that's just something interesting to really think about, that actually occurred. So an anomaly there. In the jungle, we have Volibear went from 1 out of every 5 games to 1 out of every 10, so the presence was cut in half. Relative 14-6 to MSI, I don't believe we saw much Volibear at all in the main event. I think that was an early play-ins pick. Jungle Rel was nerfed. Now, on 14-6, it was about 50-50 between jungle and support. But in the process of getting rid of Rel Jungle, Rel Support pretty much fell out of favor as well. It was the only, Rel Jungle wasn't picked at all at MSI, and it was picked sparingly at Support. But I think once you took away that flex option, Rel lost a lot of value in draft to teams. So prior to MSI, Rel had a 3 out of 5 presence. So 3 out of every 5 games, we saw Rel in some shape or form. But at the tournament, 1 out of every 10, so significantly lower, 50% less presence. And that's one of the highest. So Rek'Sai, Rel, very high presence losses. They were taken out of the meta, and that's significant. Some teams were definitely playing those champions more than others. J4 buffed in the jungle. So J4 only had a 6% presence, so that's 1 out of every 20 games roughly, just over that. And it would go from 1 out of every 20 to 20%, 1 out of every 5. 4 times more presence. And, that's a big deal. Well, 3 to 4 times. Still, that's a big difference. J4 becoming a pick for some of the top teams at the tournament towards the end in the final few days. So, yeah, that buff altered things. That changed what the dynamic was at the event. Whether the numbers make you feel like it's a buff or a nerf are irrelevant. If it actually changes the thought of how the champion is viewed is really all that matters. Solo queue experience, this is not, I don't even care about the solo queue experience. It's a different game compared to the top tier players playing the game. It's 2 totally different games in my opinion. So, people say, yeah, well, this champion's really OP in solo queue. And it's yeah, but can people really play around that champion? And things of that nature. Eventually teams adopt it if it continues to be OP, but that isn't always 100%. So in mid lane, we have 3 champions. Wei. So Wei, only 6% presence. Just 1 out of 20 games, just above that. And then at the tournament, it went up to about 17%. So about 10% more presence. 1 out of every 10 games, we saw more Wei. We saw it in the finals, right? With Genji and BLG. LeBlanc went from 1 out of every 10 games to 1 out of every 5. Presence doubled for LeBlanc due to her buffs. Azir, significantly nerfed. Now, still picked, because Azir is the way he is, right? He's a comfort pick for a lot of players. Prior to the event, 84% presence, so that's higher than 4 out of every 5 games Azir appeared either in as a pick or in the ban phase. And then afterwards, at MSI, we see a 20% decrease. So 3 out of every 5 to 2 out of every 3 games. 1 out of every 5 game decrease. It's not a ton, but it is something that did occur. It is what it is. I'm including it on here. Azir still a super strong pick. Dropped out of top 10 though in presence here. As you can see, TF had 65% presence and Azir 64. So did drop out of the top 10 of high prio picks. 80 carry, Zeri and Draven. So Zeri had a 69% presence. So over 2 out of every 3 games, Zeri appeared in ban or pick phase of draft. At the tournament, only 10%. So literally went from 2 out of every 3 games to 1 out of every 10. Might as well have been taken out of the meta completely. Teams relying on that, out of the equation. One of the most significant nerfs at this, it's second. Rek'Sai was the only one that was more significant than the Zeri nerf. So that's the thing. And items and things like that as well. That affects presence, but I don't go over the items in these videos. I just don't have the time to get into the nitty gritty with items. Draven, buffed. Went from 1 out of every 5 games to 1 out of every 3 games at the event. We saw some Draven enjoyers, Guma, Jackie Love, Hansama. We saw a lot of Pays played Draven. So, in the finals we saw Draven, I'm pretty sure, right? Or was it was T1 BLG we saw Draven. Either way, we saw Draven in important games. Weren't really seeing a lot of Draven prior to that. So went from 1 out of every 5 to 1 out of every 3 games with the buffs. A pick that I thought would take hold more so at the event, but then again, it is a coin flippy pick. You're either it's feast or famine, and that's the nature of his kit. So that's the thing. So personally, I think that this patch did change things. We saw in the finals a lot of these champions picked that were buffed. That those teams, if you look back, may very well have not been using in playoffs. So personally, I think that the patch did alter the meta to some degree. Now, top 10 in presence. Prior to the tournament, Nautilus was highest presence, followed by Azir, Vi, Varus, Rek'Sai, Rumble, Kalista, Zeri, Talia, and Rel. So, two top, a jungler, 2 mids, 3 AD carries, 2 supports. Now, at the tournament, things changed. Kalista, Senna became the 2 most common picks when it came to presence. 90% presence. They were not even 60% going into the tournament. And then afterwards, you have K'Sante. K'Sante joins the meta once more. 4 out of every 5 games, K'Sante shows up. Was not a popular pick prior to the tournament on 14-6. Talia rises. Nautilus drops a bit. Vi drops. Ashe goes to the top 10. We saw a lot of double AD carry bot lanes. Keria on. Heavy Ashe users. We saw it pick or ban. Varus drops to 8th. Only 5% less presence, but drops significantly in the order. Xin Zhao comes up into the top 10, as does Twisted Fate. So the two top laners swapped out. A jungler for a jungler, essentially, with Rel dropping out, essentially a jungle and a support prior to the event. Xin Zhao takes her place. Mid lane, only Talia is up there, as Azir just drops out of the top 10. AD carry, Kalista and Senna join. Kalista was at 71, so it went from 71 to 91%. Senna goes back up into the top 10, all the way up to tied for first place in presence. So, and then support, Ashe goes up there. So, yeah, the patch did change things. The MSI patch did alter the game. The rules did change. Some teams benefited more from it than others. And that's just the fact of the matter. I think every patch you can pretty much find a way that the rules changed in League of Legends as far as esports are concerned. And your solo queue experience does change as well, just maybe not in the way you like it, because everybody has a preferred champion, preferred role, preferred style of play, and Riot can never appeal to 200 million people or however many freaking people play this game. I don't know. So thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, like it, subscribe to the channel for daily League of Legends content. Follow me on Twitter, join the Discord, become a YouTube supporter, and hope to see you again tomorrow.